Operation Home with Irish Guardsman Graham Fergus. In this episode of Once a Warrior, Life Beyond the Uniform, we speak with Graham Fergus, a former Irish Guardsman, who shares an honest account of life after service, the struggle of losing structure, hitting rock bottom, and finding strength through his military roots. Graham recently completed Operation Home, spending 10 days in the Mourne Mountains to raise awareness of veteran homelessness, relying only on the kindness of strangers to get through. Graham reflects on how his time in the Irish Guards helped carry him through his darkest moments and the lasting bond within the regiment. This was recently highlighted by the centenary birthday of Captain John Gough, who is now the oldest living Irish Guardsman. Welcome to this edition of Once a Warrior, Life Beyond the Uniform. My name is David Johnson. I'm the Veterans Commissioner for Northern Ireland. And on this special podcast, we give veterans the opportunity to tell their story, why they joined the military, and also some experiences from that journey. But most importantly, what has their life been like after service? So today, I am absolutely delighted to be joined by Graham Fergus. Graham, really pleased you could join the podcast today.
Thank you, David, for having me. Much appreciated.
Have you come far to get here?
Nope. I was nipped into town this morning for a bit of work, so I just literally walked the other side of Belfast.
Nice and handy. Fantastic. So I've obviously saw a little bit of you on YouTube, which we'll get on to in due course, but hopefully enjoy your time on the podcast here. Starting point, where were you born? Anything sort of from early life that stands out?
No, pretty normal upbringing. My father was a policeman, and so was 3 generations before him. So I was the first one to break the mould. I am from Ballygowan, County Down originally, and now I live over in Carrickfergus.
Okay. And at school, was there any sort of sports that you were keen on, or anything that stands out in that?
I think school as a whole wasn't really great for me, to be honest. I think you've probably heard that story before. I changed school twice while I was in high school, and the only thing I really enjoyed was getting out of school, if I'm completely honest.
like a sport, like a lot of people probably, yeah. And you became an expert at that sport, I guess.
Yeah. Very good at it. School wasn't a good thing for me. Actually, later in life, I went through my education again, but it just wasn't the right place, right time, I think.
Okay, so just setting the scene then in terms of your military service, then just quickly give us a recap on that.
I suppose for a lot of people, I started in cadets. So I was a ranger in Highbank back in the day, and then one of the first cadets into Ballygowan detachment, a small little new detachment in Ballygowan. They're still running about now, although they're in Carriduff. I then joined 152. Had a security clearance issue just because where I was working at times. I did 3 years with them, and then joined the Irish Guards. I took that to my 12-year point, and then got out, give myself a few years to shake that off, and then joined 204, which is now 210 MMR.
Okay, so you're still in?
No, I've recently left.
You've recently left, okay.
This year, yeah.
Okay, so kind of went from reservist to full-time and then back into reserve?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
That's an interesting journey.
Nice big journey. So climbed up 24 years, but just split it a couple of different units.
Right, okay. No, we'll definitely get digging into that a bit, which is interesting. Especially when you said that you started off as a ranger. Being ex-Royal Irish Rangers, that's exactly what I like to hear. But you decided to downgrade then and join the...
I think that's a long argument that we probably don't have time for.
Yeah, definitely not.
No, but most of the time, it's really great to represent an Irish regiment. I suppose it depended on where the penny landed for you. For me, it was always about getting away from Northern Ireland, getting away with the troubles that were here, and doing something in the Guards. At that time, had a really good recruitment program, and I wanted to get part of that.
Yeah. Well, my uncle was actually 16 or 17 years Irish Guards, so it is very much close to the family heart. He ends up actually WO2 working in Bird's Cage Walk. Isn't that what you call your survival headquarters? So that's where he finished up. So for the Irish Guards.
Then, David.
Well, I got some good tips off him, that's for sure. He definitely has some interesting tips on how to make sure you're turned out well.
Yeah.
I think he was in Aden from memory.
Wow.
Certainly I got some good stories from him over the years. Same name as myself, David Johnson. So
brilliant.
So definitely, Irish Guards. I was jesting earlier, but Irish Guards. It's definitely a good place in our family. So in terms then of joining the cadets, was it a desire to be sort of ingrained military, or was it just some friends joined up? Was anything particular, or just it seemed a good thing to do at the time?
I think at that age, 13, running around, kids don't really have a lot to do, and we weren't all like children nowadays. We were sort of locked up. We were that bunch of kids raking around every town and every village in a big gang. And it was nice to put into something, bit of direction from my father, let's put some infrastructure and some boundaries and some mentoring into your life. And the cadets seemed a good way to do it. Probably as well, because he could get rid of me and I could go to camp on weekends and he could get his head shard. Because it'd be fair to say, David, I was not the easiest child to look after growing up. But no, I really enjoyed it. Started in Hyde Bank, and the journey was brilliant. I know a lot's changed now, but the adult instructors who give up their time to show you, like they take children from every walk of life without bias and start at the basics and show you just how to be a good person, I suppose, is the first thing. And then how to fit in with other people and understand that everyone's different. And then they start setting goals and allowing you to push through, the ranks and the badges. So it was really, really good fitting for me. And the penny started dropping not long after I joined that.
I think you make a really good point about just the character building aspect of being, in some ways, any organization. I suppose the Boy Scouts, the BB, all those organizations instill some values in children, be it boys or girls, whatever organization they're in, and certainly the cadets does that. And it's interesting that you highlighted that, and what you find looking back now, you recognise that helped shape who you are now because you were maybe challenged from a discipline point of view. You were given values of service and helping others, and you reckon that did impact your life?
Oh, absolutely. I think the cadets adds in so much community as well.
That's a good point.
I still have friends now who I was in the cadets with, and we still talk about the days in the cadets, and we still talk about when I left to go to the regular army. And we still communicate and we talk about those good days. We really did, go through some, it might not seem tough now, but lying out as a 13-year-old underneath the stars, getting soaked, is a bit of a challenge for some people. So going through all of that was brilliant. And then you add in the other elements from the cadets. They put in the shooting, add in some physical education and training there, drill for that discipline. And then obviously the Duke of Edinburgh, that. Right, we're out of the green uniform, but we're away camping was brilliant. So absolutely, really, really, I think it's a really important thing to retain and acknowledge how much relevance the cadets add to communities.
Yeah, I think that's really good point. In terms then, like 152, you mentioned, you ended up sort of there. I think give you a few quid for the time you spent. Tax-free bounties and all of that on the go back in those days, wasn't it?
They were there, and to be honest, I left school and took up a career as a joiner. So I did all my apprenticeship as a joiner. That was one of my father's stipulations. He would not sign me away to the army, which I'd always wanted to do.
Right, okay.
Unless I did that. And then in the background, I was working all over Belfast with all people from all walks of life. So when my security clearance went in for the Irish Guards, it was deferred for 3 years. Because of that, I think it was just one of those things back then, in the late 80s, early 90s. So I was told to reach out to some of the local reserve units on 152 with a transport. Thought, well, that'll be handy. I'll get maybe a driving license and I'll find out about logistics. I was brilliant, really, really good guys, and the unit's still going today, which is testament to what they offer here.
Yeah. So you said there that you always had a desire to join the military. Where'd that come from?
I think obviously my father, his father before, and we're all serving. They're all serving their community in one way or the other. And for some reason, the police just didn't resonate with me. I wasn't arrested by the police when I was little, but I thought there's bound to be more to that. There's bound to be a service that I can do a little bit more that represents the country rather than the town. It represents that. And you probably don't realize it when you're 13, but all of those conversations you have with people, it's like, right, you've got this star, you've got this rank. I wonder, could you do it? I wonder, could you do it regular? I wonder, could you make a job out of this? And to be fair, David, there wasn't much I was good at as a kid, but I was actually quite talented as a young soldier, a young cadet. And I thought, right, I feel good about what I'm doing here. I'm gonna give it a whirl.
Right. Yeah. So you almost felt comfortable in that environment of being a soldier.
Yeah, absolutely. And the uncertainty of what your day brings when you're a cadet, because they don't tell you day by day your program, but being able to react to change or deal with different situations and not get, all sort of confuddled when you're 13 to 18. That's something that maybe a lot of children today struggle with, but the cadets ironed that out for me. And I thought, right, I'm very comfortable being uncomfortable. I like the exercise too. I like getting fit. I like going and doing stuff and the challenge. And then I suppose the biggest thing at that young age was looking back and going, we did something together as a group of people who didn't know each other. So you get that camaraderie. And there's, boys and girls, you just sort of get that. It feels like you've achieved something. And for many years, I didn't achieve anything. I was just maybe a little bit of a burden to my poor parents who were trying their best for me. So I was maybe giving something back both ways,
I know, it's interesting. I love your statement there, being comfortable, being uncomfortable. I don't think I've heard that before. Is that one you coined yourself? Or have you heard that before? No,
I think I slipped that in a while ago. I've used it a few times with the old LinkedIn, or maybe put it into a bit of what I do in work, especially when you're talking to people, in your civilian life now. Talk about the stretch and the grow, and it's something I think it's really good for us to do.
Yeah, no, I like that. I think I'm going to take that for myself and use that for myself now. Trademark. No, I like that. So you had the sort of a desire to get into the military through the cadets, 052. The decision to go then to the Irish Guards and sort of, I'm making a career of this. I'm going to be, down this path. You mentioned earlier that it was sort of a good recruiting activities from the Irish Guards. So to talk me through what was it about the recruiting? When did you first sort of see that as an option?
Yeah, well, I suppose my family, dad was police. I had aunties and uncles who were home service, UDR. There's a big Ranger tradition in that side of the family.
Good to hear it.
Yeah, and they were all good people, and they did great work. And I thought, right, I need to do something a little bit different. And I think it was, let's get out of Northern Ireland and then see what's out there. When I dug into it, when I went and spoke to the recruiting sergeant, I'll never forget him. Davy Mills, he's still here now, and I still speak to him.
Right.
He promised my mother that, don't worry, there'll be no trouble. We have not been away to war for a long time, so we'll get him in, we'll get him fit, we'll show him how to look after himself, and then sure, he'll be home to see you quite a lot. And I still remember, that walking into Palace Barracks for that first interview to have the conversation. Dad was very happy. He's like, yes, I'm getting rid of him. Mom's not so happy. She's like, is he actually going? But no, it was a really good, that was a really good transition. I think the bit I'll never forget is getting off the train at Brookwood Station when you actually arrive in England. A lot of my mates were going to Ballymena, so they were just on the road.
Yeah.
I was on a plane and on a train, having never been there before. And you get off the train with your wee bag and you look around and there's another 4 lads who you've never met before all doing the same thing.
And you kind of know they're going to the same place, but who speaks first?
They'll never leave me, yeah.
Yeah, well, I've never had that in terms of obviously joining the regulars, but when you go on courses, that kind of happens. You're given your train tickets and your warrants, and then you land and you look around and you kind of go, I think he's on the same course, but a bit uneasy. Do you go and stay or not? Or what age were you then when you went?
Because I did a couple of years in the reserves of the TA, then I joined just before my 20th birthday, 2021, just before.
That's still young though. That's still young to land on a train over in England on your own.
Yeah. But I was lucky because I'd served my time as a joiner, so I'd been in building sites, I'd been around, kind of experience.
An unforgiving environment, building sites, that's for sure.
Yeah, so I was a little bit hardier than maybe someone that turned up at 17 who'd literally just walked out of school. And in training, I think that worked good for me, but it also made detriment where all of the instructors were like, right, you're the grown up here, you're responsible when we're not here. So there was a little bit of pressure, in depot as a young recruit trying to get through that, but also then having the responsibilities of being the grown up for the children.
And now, of course, they were going, that's leadership quality.
Yeah.
We need to test him about his leadership because this is a man destined to maybe help the ranks a bit, no?
There was 2 brothers who were Lance Sergeant instructors in Purbeck Depot, the Wright brothers. They were both at the same rank in the same time. One of them was one of our platoon staff. And let's just say he taught me some very valuable lessons. He was definitely strict on me. I definitely got a lot less sleep than other people. I definitely had a bit of a tougher. And again, joining the Irish Guards, but you were joining with all the other guards. There was only me and one other guy from Northern Ireland.
I was about to say, next one, yeah.
And yeah, you did get treated differently.
Yeah.
You did. You did get nicknames. You did. you did have to go around the back of the block to open your meal because they used to joke at you and say, "Here, Paddy's got a bomb, get him around the back." You know, it was, which is common military banter. But
Yes,
you're
of
like,
course.
Hold on a second here, what's going on? But it was good.
To try wearing a carbine and some of the courses to hear the fun about that, with the tea bag in the head and all of that, you know. But no, it is, because there definitely was a period where, and it was primarily military banter, but where some people found it difficult to cope with the paddy, the extra attention, shall we say, that came their way. But that was just the era that.
But I think the military banter is something that, you can look back on now, and it's got me through a lot of stuff.
Yes,
A lot
absolutely.
of stuff. So
Absolutely.
maybe if you looked at it through a lens of today's society, looking back 25 years ago, it would not fit. But actually, looking back at it now with my experience, it has got me through a lot of difficult times, or when you need to laugh something off, or you need to say, right, this is not the biggest issue here. Let's just take this as it is. And I rarely do get upset about anything these days, because you just can laugh it off. So it was good. It was good life lessons, and it needed to happen, especially in my case, being a wee terror.
Yeah, well, would you say it's interesting, because I've had this with other podcast guests, that I'm involved in Irish League football. So I can recall what it was like for me becoming a player. Back in the day, I actually played under Roy Coyle at Ards for a while, real old school taskmaster. And you go back in the recruits course in 1988, and then through Sandhurst in the early 90s, and the way you were, inverted commas, beasted and given a hard time, which you say, looking back now, that kind of wouldn't be acceptable in society.
Yeah.
But would you agree or disagree that actually we've lost a little bit of resilience, of that discipline means we're maybe not producing as good a final product, because some of that hardship, shall we say, is not really being, can they stop and put through that hardship to make them a better product? Is that a fair way of putting it? Would you agree
I
or
would
disagree?
agree, David. I would absolutely agree. Listen, I think if you are joining the military and your job is to defend the country, you shouldn't be getting it as easy as someone that's wake up in their bed every day that can just go about their business with no hardship.
Yeah.
If you don't push yourself through a physical and mental barrier, if you don't go through that military regime of being systematically broken down and stripped down without any harassment or bullying, but stripped down, identified of who you are, someone then, a really good quality military leader saying, I can see their attributes, I can see what they will be good at, and that's your first starting block in your transition to military life, and saying, right, that's the fittest person, or that's the best person at my breeding, that guy's the weapon guy. If you don't start with those foundations, I do think, I'm not all about the old days where people just get beasted for no reason, but, sometimes using physical stimulation, getting people fitter, actually brings the team together.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, when you go to war, you're not getting a lift everywhere. You have to go and you have to get amongst it, and you have to use physical effort.
Yeah.
And if you can't back it up by mental resilience,
Yeah.
you're not training soldiers anymore.
Yeah.
You're sending people to war who aren't prepared and expect higher casualties.
It's interesting the way you've said that, Graham, because when you're sending people to war not as trained as they could be, that in itself is negligence.
Absolutely.
So where is that balance, as you say? We're not talking about bullying, we're not talking about some things perhaps happened in the past, but there is a need to absolutely take people to their limit.
Yeah.
To find out where is that limit.
Yeah.
Be that physically, be that mentally, be that part of a group in a challenging situation. And it's only when someone is tested to that limit that in some cases they realise they can do more than they thought. And many a person in the military have found that. They wouldn't have dreamed a million years they could have walked as far, carrying as much, or been able to react in a combat situation if you'd asked them when they started.
Yeah.
But it's that journey that prepares them.
Well, thinking back now to when I did my Lance Corporal's course, and the Guards always did their Corporal's course with the Parachute Regiment. They had a close affiliation. Yes, of course, they wear those hats and all that sort of stuff. But when we did training together, it worked out to put the resources of the 5 Guards regiments and the Parachute regiments together. And they did, they called it their Drill and Duties course. We called it HDPRCC. And I can look back now as a young Lance Corporal saying that was probably the toughest course I ever done, because you're not prepared for that. And yes, you're a soldier, and yes, you might be fit, but you're a young soldier, and they really put you to the extreme. And there was times there where you had to have a long, good, hard talk to yourself. Mm-hmm. Why are you doing this, and are you going to be able to make it through? And I did. That was a really big bookmark in my journey of what I can and can't do.
Yeah. Okay. So operational tours.
personal tours. So I did Kosovo. David Mills told my mum I'd never go to war. And a year after the battalion, I was in Macedonia waiting to go to Kosovo. When I joined the battalion, they were pretty full on rifle companies. So by default, I then went to support company, which maybe people don't know, but generally in the infantry, you serve your time in a rifle company and then you specialize. So I went to an anti-tank platoon, and I was 72 of 74. So it was a big platoon, and I was very, very, very low down the ladder. So that was good. I did Iraq 2003. And then I was over Northern Ireland on a couple of tours for a couple of different reasons.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. So you were 2003. That was the warfighting phase you guys were involved in. Yeah.
Yeah.
My brother was over with the 1st Battalion. He was actually in Mike Murdoch's company, the head of Rivka.
Yeah.
So he'd been in the Ulster Defence Regiment, then went to the 1st Battalion. Was 2nd Battalion, and then they merged in the early 90s. And then he left and joined the reserve, the Rangers, and then got mobilised. And he was over in Chilwell, and some of the guys spotted him and took him out of the defence platoon and put him back into the battalion.
Brilliant.
So he had a good.
It was a difficult
good
one for
tour.
the Irish Guards because they took the battalion and split them up. You know, if you want to go to war, you'd like to go with everybody.
With your unit, yeah.
You'd like to be able to do 4 passages of lines through your own companies. You'd like to be able to know who's where. We'll get split up to the 9s.
Right.
And because I was anti-tanks, I just done my detachment commander's course. You then become a brigade asset. So we were thermal OPs. I was going to say you were anti-armor, ambushes, and then general OPs as well. So yeah, we had a pretty secular time for the first couple of weeks of that tour. And we were more surrounded by tanks than we were other infantry. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And not asking you any details if you can't go into it, but any incidents come to mind? Any sort of combat situations that you
There was
share?
rounds fired from us where we were. I won't again go into it. I didn't sustain any casualties with our detachment or our lads, but yeah, we were in a pretty controversial part of the war fighting. Some of it that was maybe in the papers afterwards.
Okay.
So I'll avoid comment on
Yeah,
that.
no,
But if that's
absolutely.
okay.
Yeah. So just in general, what was that experience like as a human being? You join up, you're probably thinking, well, that might happen, and then all of a sudden you're post a combat situation. How did you feel about your own performance as an individual, and then how did it again shape you as an individual?
I suppose all 3 situations. Kosovo, you're not ready for. Yeah. You hear mass graves, you hear about genocide. You're not ready for that until you see it. And you're told your job, look after this, protect that, go here, do a recce here. And we were controlling traffic. Again, being anti-tanks, we get put onto the fringes of the battlefield. We were quite up close to the Serbian border, and we were doing VCPs and stopping vehicles, checking ID. And some of the things you see there were, very difficult to unsee. I think that was a challenge, especially as young lads. We were together as a unit, which was great. But there's some stuff that you think, right, this is actually war. Now, we weren't the target, but you can see how that's going to affect people forever. Like, 4 generations of family wiped out, coming to a VCP with, a young son driving a tractor and his whole family in the back of it under a tarp, that sort of stuff is difficult for anyone to go. I think in Iraq, it was very different because the media built it up. You were going to war. It looked a bit more attritional. It looked like we were going to get in here. We were going to do our job. I also don't think lots of people understood as a soldier, well, at my level anyway, why we were going. Nobody really knew why we were going to go.
Yeah. There was definitely confusion. And even confusion over the whole legitimacy of the war. Was it just war or not? That was certainly something that we discussed a lot of, sort of as you sat at night, under the mortar shelter, the whole validity of it.
Well, we were struggling, first of all, because we didn't have uniform. So if you were in a vehicle, I was in a warrior, I was a gunner stroke anti-tank detachment commander. So because it was only the top part of my body poking out of the turret, I had a desert top, but I had green bottoms and black boots. And we only had enough uniform to swab around. And people think that's a joke. And I'm actually not joking. If you weren't getting out of the vehicle, you didn't have desert uniform. We weren't sure about the threat of NBC. So there was days we were wearing full NBC kit in the middle of the desert in Iraq. And there was days where we weren't. It was strange. It was really strange. It took probably 8 weeks to get into the pattern and the rhythm of what that was about. And then it sort of ended quite quickly, and we became more resilient and stopping people from looting and, trying to get amongst the population. And Northern Ireland, that was the strangest. I'll really be honest with you. I take my hat off to anyone that was full-time Northern Ireland, because you're a member of your community. It doesn't matter how far you go. People in Northern Ireland are very nosy. They'll always say, "How are you? And where are you from? Oh, you're not related to. Do you know your man?"
That's right.
And when we
What school do you go to?
yeah, exactly. And, I think that's something that society's had to deal with here because of legacy issues. But, yeah, I remember going down south. We were working around South Armagh, and a guy came out of a pub. He was brilliant. It was brilliant crack. And we were doing a little bit of a walk around a village. And he came out and he says, "Hey, boy, you any of them peelers with you?" I says, "No, sir, not that I had no place is good. For I had about 9 pints." I says, "Well, I wish you the best of luck, sir. If you don't stick it in the hags." And he really laughed and tittered at me. But I was respectful to everyone where I was working. They didn't like me. They didn't like the uniform. They weren't that keen. But I was respectful because it was their town and their village. And to be fair, I was a multiple commander, and me and my lads were okay. We did see some stuff. We had to go to 2 suicides. We had to assist with bringing people down who'd hung themselves, both of which unfortunately were related to terrorism. And we had to go and help people in a few RTAs. But it was very difficult to move around to do that. Stuff where people say, "You're first aiders, you're qualified to deal in emergencies. Can you help us?" Well, unfortunately, we can't for threat of life.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So I think Northern Ireland was difficult. It was the weirdest thing to be. You wore your hat, but you didn't know whether you were trying to pretend to be nice as a civilian, where you were nice as a civilian, or were you doing your job. And I suppose then when you spoke to the local, it was the IUC then as well. They had a tough time dealing with everything because they were in the midst of it for years. But across all three, you know what? I seen some stuff. I luckily never really got into any much bother. There was maybe one mortar that landed quite close to us, but didn't go off in Iraq. But no, I did all right out of it. I've got to say.
And here to tell the story.
Absolutely. Yeah, very grateful for it.
Yeah. Well, look, a big part of this podcast, it'd be so easy just to talk about all the military experiences, but really, life beyond the uniform. That's really what we want to pivot to and talk about. So, I know for a lot of veterans as they are now, leaving that environment, and especially if it was someone like yourself who did see some sort of real, say, life-changing, but certainly sobering sights and the realities of war, if we want to put it that way. What was transition like for you? Did it go well? Were there challenges?
I think transitioning for me wasn't something I planned for, to be honest with you. I was a career soldier, and as many soldiers, male or female, will understand, it takes a toll on the family life. It really does. It takes a huge toll on the family life. I got to quite a decent rank at quite a short level of time. So within my full 12 years, I qualified as a colour sergeant, done all my courses, picked up my board. I didn't wear it. I would just say that now because I left before then. But I was going quite fast, I think, for a young soldier. And you imagine to get to that rank, the amount of months you have to spend away, qualified to do it. So the first thing for me was make a decision. Why do you want to leave? And then the motivator was not me wanting to leave myself. The motivator was, I really need to patch things up. I really need to get my life in order, and I need to have a look around at what I'm doing, and I'm moving in the right direction. And to be fair, I'd given a lot of time to everything other than my family at that stage. And my son, every so often will have a heart-to-heart with me now and say, "Dad, is that me? You know what I mean? What were you doing? Or why were you away? Or why did you do this?" And do you know what? Fair play. He doesn't mess about, and he's called me out in a few things, but it was work. It was work, and you had to do it. So the transition for me was bumpy. I didn't want to leave, but I did. And I took a friend with me my last weekend in Windsor, and we obviously had a few drinks with a few friends, and then we were getting out, and we were waiting for a taxi, and the big metal gate shut behind us for the big slam. And, it's a lovely camp. It's in a beautiful part of the world. But he still talks to me now and says, "I remember those gates shutting. And I asked you a question." And he said, "Graeme, what's next? Or can you ever go back in there?" And that stuck with me for a while. It really resonated. The whole way home, the whole way in the taxi back to the airport, the flight home. And I thought, I actually have no idea. I had a job. I was employed. I knew what my next 2 years would look like. But I didn't know what would ever happen with the door closing behind me. Had I just walked away from everybody I'd ever worked with and ever met before. And that started a few cogs turning, I think. For me, I got a job working defence anyway. So I sort of had a shoe in. If you're hanging around the military community, even though I was a civilian, it made that a lot softer.
Yeah.
But again, by virtue of who we are and what we did, I got a job that made me travel a little bit. So I spent a bit more time out of bed, working in Africa for about 4.5, 5 years. And it was in shifts. So 6 weeks away, a couple of months off, 6 weeks
At least you're
away.
home for good blocks, which is,
But that is where the thing started unraveling,
you're still away again then scenario.
You're still away, and when you come back, what do you do? And the tempo of my home life had changed dramatically. Children were getting to an age where they were very aware about where I was and what I did. Relationship was not good. It actually broke down, and within a year of me transitioning, that fell apart. I then became the parent or guardian for my 2 children, and I wasn't ready for it. I had no idea what that would look like. There's a lot to be said for maternal instincts. And guys, some guys can say they have it. I was very good at keeping my house tidy. I was very good at making sure my children were clothed and fed. I was very good at doing all of the things that I thought everyone outside wanted to see. If you walked into my house, it was immaculate, but that was no good for the children because their bedroom was like a museum. It didn't work. And I relied really heavily on discipline, and I relied really heavily on having things done so that anyone outside was going, right, you haven't failed, you've done this job.
Yeah.
And unfortunately that fell apart.
That's not what maybe the children needed. So within that transition period, did you ever reach out back into the military or any support groups or agencies to help in that scenario, or did you find either A, you wanted just to do it yourself, you didn't want to ask for help, or did you ask for help and you found it wasn't there?
Neither of those two, David, I'll be honest, I was too embarrassed. I was too embarrassed to tell people where I had a really successful career up to the point of leaving, to say now I'm an outside, I'm a single father with 2 kids and I can't go. I couldn't do it. Who could you go to say who's going to help me with this when I have a really good family. My family network is brilliant. It's a small family, but they're brilliant. But even at that point, my behavior, the way I was acting, how I was trying to cope was pulling that apart. So marriage breaking down, children relationship falling apart, and now that was spilling into family. So who would you go to and say, here lads, do you see how well I did in my military career? Do you see how well I was coping, where I'd been, what I've seen? And now I can't deal with this.
Yeah.
It was just probably one step too far, if I'm honest.
I mean, I'm assuming the Irish Guards have the welfare and regiment. So, I mean, you ever thought of reaching out to either ex-friends or that type of welfare, or you just felt, as you say, embarrassed, you just didn't want to go there?
Officially, no. I joined the Ulster branch, Irish Guards Association. I did stuff with them, but David, I'm sure you've seen it, and lots of people have. You know, the person that says everything's okay is not the person that says it's okay. Some of my close friends in the military knew, that things weren't great, and they threw in check-ins, and do you want to come here, and do you want to take up this hobby? But it was just a lot to deal with, and I wasn't ready for being a single dad. I wasn't ready for not being, in that family that you thought you were going to be in, and then I wasn't ready for everything that sort of transpired after it. So no, I didn't reach out. I know plenty of people do, and I know the service that the military community offer is brilliant. But if you don't use it, then you're not going to benefit from it. In hindsight now, if I had put my hands up and said, folks, can you help me? I know there would have been swarms of people around me.
Yes.
I didn't make that decision.
As a Veterans Commissioner, that's kind of what I was trying to sort of tease out, that there probably was people who would have loved and would have absolutely tried to step in and help you and be there for you and, provide what support they could. But if they don't know, they can't do it. Very often veterans will say, there's no support for veterans. The reality is that there is support, but the veterans have to put their hand up, which is hard, which is absolutely difficult in the scenario you're describing. Any ideas how you bridge that gap? Because you've told a very, and I thank you for being so personal and honest there, but your story could be reflected, goodness knows, hundreds of thousands of times over across the UK with veterans, with a whole range of challenges. How do we bridge that gap? How do we make it easier for those that have served to put their hand up and ask for help?
I honestly think, and again, this is in hindsight, so it's always easy to flip that in. When people decide they're going to leave at their 12-year point, they've actually decided at their 9 or 10-year point. I think there needs to be an intervention for every soldier. And I'm not talking about those that have been to war fighting and those that never been. I think, you get to that 11-year point and you can sign off, and you're literally 6 clicks away from, 6 clicks and 12 months away from taking 11 years of your life and putting it away. So I think the military should really look at an intervention at your 9 or 10 year point and say, right, forget career. Are you moving on with this or are you not? And if people have decided that's where they're going to go, well, you know, in my civvy life, I've seen some of the staff that have worked for me and I've trained and mentored fly past me, like doing so well in their careers and their lives. And I implore that. I think that's brilliant. So if people want to leave the military and they're making a decision, maybe a little bit earlier intervention there and saying, right, they're going to go out. This is going to be a veteran in 2 years. Are they ready? Don't make assumptions. Don't make assumptions about how much money somebody's got, how well they've done in their career, where they're going to go. Take everything as an unknown until they know it. And that's just one way. And I suppose the other way is, I was told by the command officer when I left, he said he was very disappointed, but he said, please join the association. Not only that I could put back in, but that I can also take out. And I think the key here is don't be afraid to take out because you've earned it. You've earned it. You've done your time. You deserve to be able to withdraw from that bank and say, I need some help, or I need somewhere to go, or I need some guidance, or I just need someone to sit down with me and spend an hour listening to me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, it is. I've obviously only in this post since January, and we've done a number of road shows, as they're called, and lots 25, 30 support agencies will be there in the room. Maybe 100 plus veterans will come to it, and the amount of people who don't really have a need right now, but who come to that, not just for the free meal, but come to that for the food, but just the camaraderie, just that sense of belonging again, just that sense of, I haven't been forgotten, my service has not been forgotten, and just a chance to catch up with some old friends, and that is so important if you've been in that environment to then be out of it. And it's interesting your commanding officer saying, join the association, not just to give to it, but also to take out of it when you need it. That is so important.
I think with veterans, you're always searching for where you fit in. In the military, you had a clearly defined set of rules. You had a clearly defined set of goals. You had objectives. And you knew in a hierarchy where you fitted in. You knew in your daily day-to-day life where you fit in. And you could probably see the next 12 months down the line. There's not too many civilians who have that.
Yeah.
And you whip that away from somebody, very difficult to see what tomorrow looks like. And, you know, I've been out a while now, and I say to veterans, lots of people give me a shout on LinkedIn or on my social media or get my number and say what I do. And they will always try and get involved in everything. They'll try and join every community group. They'll try and get into these different organizations. I say, just take your time and don't feel that you need to do that. Just relax a little bit, work out what's good for you, get a balance right, and then do that, which I think is really, really important. But I've noticed veterans always want to do more. And what I would say from the ones I've worked with, you know, we all seem to stick in our little seculars. I was in this regiment, I was in that regiment. Where actually, if you've seen veterans, and there's small groups of people doing it now, come together in the community they live in, regardless of camp badge, and say, in Fergus, there's a group of veterans who now go out and just pick up litter, and they get together. So they're getting some exercise, they're helping the community, they feel good, and veterans are getting recognised for doing the good work that they always did.
Yeah.
Instead of sitting back and looking and saying, well, I need help. That's the wrong message.
Yeah.
Not all veterans need help.
Yeah, that's
lots and lots of veterans do things for everybody else and continue to serve to their last breath. So I think looking at that's a good way as well.
No, I think, again, it's a really good point you make, because something that we do highlight a lot is that the vast majority of veterans, in fact, after service, don't have any major issues.
Yeah.
You know, they get a new career, or they, you know, change direction in their lives and don't necessarily end up in a crisis point.
Yeah.
Obviously, those that do need the help, but sometimes because of, you know, the press will be about the veteran who slept in the streets. The press will not be front page about the successful person who joined the business, or the lady that started her own, you know, company.
Yeah.
That'll never make front page news.
Yeah, look
but
at
the bad story will.
Look at the news. You know, anytime a military veteran or military personnel does anything, it'll always say veteran or military. It doesn't say John the milkman from Portadown.
Yeah.
It'll never mention their job
right.
because
right.
it's a motive.
Yeah.
And the news think that adding in this story and putting in veteran or service person in front of it will get more likes and get more traction.
Yeah.
Well, actually, before they were a veteran and before they were a military serving personnel, they were a person too.
Correct.
So I think we need to remove that stigma. I don't think that's fair at all.
Yeah.
Either everybody gets their name, rank, and title about their job, or they don't.
Or no, that's right. Because it creates perceptions that don't exist.
Exactly.
That's the reality. But again, that's the world we live in, I suppose, unfortunately, with today's social media and mainstream media. It's all about, clicks and sales and likes and all the rest of it, you know. So in terms then of you had a difficult time in transition, and then obviously you managed to get through that. Was there anything particular got you through it, or just the passage of time and kids getting older? What kind of, at what point did you feel I've kind of come through that and I'm on the other side of it?
The truth be told, when you hit rock bottom, when I hit rock bottom, so family fell apart, as in my children went to move in with their grandparents. I was on my own. I had a job. I was trying my very best to get back into society. I'd lost my house. I was unemployed. And I had to turn up at the brew office every second Thursday to try and get some money off them. Then I looked at myself and said, how have you fallen so far, mate? And I had a really good long talk to myself. I was still exercising. I was still out every day doing some form of exercise. I was still being positive and optimistic. But I woke up that morning and said, right, mate, you're now at bottom. Be thankful that you cannot fall any further, because some people never know where the bottom is, right? Some people have dependencies. I didn't. So I got to the very bottom of that and said, right, now let's build back up. Let's go.
Yeah. Interesting that's kind of the moment, if you like, the realization, the dawning of where you were, and then from there, then things thankfully sort of improved, and you got back on that, which is just great.
Built myself back up, went to school, got re-educated. I had some successful jobs. I'm now head of facilities for a digital technology company. I have met a lovely lady, got remarried again, and life is pretty good. But again, without that fall from grace, without that realization, and without the military to depend on, I probably wouldn't be where I am now.
Yeah. But even that in itself, Graham's important, because sometimes when people are in that situation, when you listen to the stories, very often it's a sense of hopelessness, or there is no future for me is like the burden that weighs most heavy. You've, as you've described in your own words, hit rock bottom, but now you've managed to, if you like, turn life around to being, successful, having fulfilling relationships, and having a sense of purpose again.
Absolutely, and the same skills that sort of I could equate to put me into that position got me back out of it. Whether that's unfair to say or not, that's true.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, we're sort of coming towards the end, and I know you enjoy the Mourne Mountains a little bit with your walking and your and some of the work you do to raise funds and raise awareness. Just speak to that for a minute.
I am a huge advocate, as I suppose a lot of my colleagues or veterans are, of helping others. We always try to help others, and I try every year to raise some funds to help people. So this year, something that's been really close to my heart has been homelessness. There is a focus on that with a narrow lens for veterans. There's veterans of Belfast who are homeless. It's not always their fault, and there's people that need help right now, and it's something that's getting more and more rising, I suppose. So I decided this year that I would take myself off and I would do a challenge to get some money. And I'm never a man for holding my hand out and just give me. So I thought I had to do something to earn that. So I went up the Mourne Mountains for 10 days. I took everything I needed for 10 days. I only took 1 day's worth of food, and I didn't take a tent. And I raised a bit of money for it. I called it Operation Home.
Yeah, and because I followed a bit.
Oh, brilliant!
It was noted in the office. We were kind of the most frustrating thing is I was actually on the Mournes one of the days that you were on the Mournes, and I can't remember if I found out about. I think I actually only found out about what you were doing sort of after that.
Yeah.
But I was thinking to myself, if I'd known that, it would have been brilliant to have met up. But and you found like just people who were aware of what you were doing, because there's quite a good community. I'm assuming that was announced on the Mourne's Facebook accounts and stuff. So people give you food, give you your dinner and things like that as you went along, and you survived the whole 10 days.
Yeah, I never missed a meal. So whether it was someone finishing up a picnic and giving me a bit of bread, a bag of crisps or something, that was amazing. And the people that are on the Mournes, people that get up and go to the mountains to go to walk, they had to live there, and that's been their life. Or they want to do something, they want to go for a run, or they want to stretch themselves. It has a mindset that matches very well the military people. Get up and go.
Absolutely.
Go and do something. Keep your body and your mind fit and healthy, because you're going to need them in later life. So all the people I met were remarkable, and I never missed one meal, not one.
Yeah. Well, myself and a friend of mine, Ian Brown, who always enjoys raising funds for the RBL and stuff, we went and did the Great Tommy Sleep Out. About 8 of us and went down to Shanna,
Yeah,
just below Dolan. And that was at the end of March. March was that? Yeah, the end of March.
chilly enough.
It was a cold night. You're telling me. The stars were nice, but it was cold,
chilly
you know. But I had a few steaks and all that night, and all it was good. But no, I think it's brilliant, as you say. The Mournes community, when you meet people, there is a camaraderie, even just from meeting strangers in the Mournes about it. So, and did you have to ask people for food, or how many people knew who you were from sort of the PR that you were doing?
Well, I did get onto one news channel, so they did a bit at friends and family sharing stories. But you know, if you've got a random person lying down on a roll mat in a bivvy bag with no tent, you know, you can strike up conversation quite well. There was one part at Leitrim Lodge where I was camped out beside the gate, so I felt like a bit of a troll, you know, hiding there and asking them for money to get through. But yeah, people stopped and talked and took an interest. And when I got to Tullymore on day 7, I actually got to get a shower, and the amount of people who just walked by and said, "Are you Operation Home? Are you that guy?"
Seriously?
Yeah. And the word had spread.
That must have been rewarding for you to recognise that people understood what you were doing and understood that.
Yeah, well, I had 20 kilos in my back. I did 5 for the 7.7s. It was getting tight towards the end because the weather turned the last 2 days and we got rain. But the minute I've got £6,500, so I
I was
think,
about to ask you how much you've raised.
yeah, I think it's well worth it. And you know, the kindness of people is just unbelievable. People just give you something and help you out. So it's brilliant.
And where do you plan to deploy that? Will that be given to a charity or who?
Well, I didn't want to make it all about. I didn't want to make it all about any particular
Yes,
side of the community.
yes,
I think
understand
it's
that.
really important that, you know, veterans serve everybody. They always have.
yeah.
So I made 3 pots and allowed the community of Northern Ireland to pick where they wanted to go. So one was AA for the SMA. The other one was Blesma, really close to my heart.
Yeah.
And the other one was the Welcome Organisation, who do lots of work in Belfast to help homelessness. And the good thing, the message that's come out is like homelessness isn't just someone that has an alcohol or drug addiction in the street.
Yeah.
It's lots and lots of different people can be classified as homeless. So to bring that to the fore, I think has been a really good message.
Yeah. So I think it's amazing that you've the journey you've been on. You know, to go into the military, have the reserve, full time reserve, have the challenges come out of that, and still have the desire, if you like, to give back. I think that's testament to you and your character. Also testament probably to your upbringing. That you were saying your dad would be glad to get you out of the house when you go in the military. I'm sure he was proud as well.
Oh, very proud. Yeah, yeah. My passing out parade, he was still in the police and he turned up in his police uniform. So it was I've got
I can imagine. Probably that generation where they maybe didn't say too much about their emotions. I could just imagine him.
Still doesn't.
Yeah, that's
Unless we have a wee tipple, maybe a few things slip
it comes out. Yeah, but and then you obviously must have been proud as well, knowing that he was so proud of you.
Absolutely, it goes round and round. It is a calling. You have to want to do it. And if you do, you're not doing it. It's not self-serving. You're doing it for the betterment of others, you know.
Yeah. No, testament to that. So what is the future for Graham Fergus?
Well, my military offering is now over. I'm not a young man anymore, so I'm happy to say that that's come to an end. I still am very keen to raise money, so I haven't put it into motion yet, but I'm planning my next charity thing next year. Very lucky that my wife let me go away for 10 days because actually I used annual leave from work, so I took her holiday time to go and raise money for other people. So just
She wasn't bringing you food on the sly or anything up the mornings, no?
No, I only ever had 2 meals with me. I only ever had 2 meals with me at any time. So if someone said, here's your food for next week, I didn't take it. I was really, really integral to the cause.
Good.
So planning what we should do for the next charity thing, and then seeing how I can thank her for everything she's let me do and continue to let me do, which is maybe go away somewhere for a nice weekend, you know.
Yeah, good. Okay, so last question then. What message would you give if I was sitting opposite you now as a veteran who was struggling with transition, having some issues, in life in general, maybe in a similar situation do you find yourself in? What would you say to them? What message would you want them to understand if you could kind of impregnate that into their brain?
I would say don't wait. Don't wait to be given. You have earned the right to everything in front of you. You've earned the right to belong. You've earned the right to be established. You have nothing to prove to anybody, whether you did 4 years or whether you did 40 years. You belong in the community. You have served. So don't be thinking you have to put your hand down to ask. But really importantly, be involved in the military community after service, because you'll never get anyone like it. There is no issue with race, religion, colour, creed. You served and you're respected for that service, and you won't get that level of respect anywhere else. And don't doubt yourself. Imposter syndrome is a huge thing. If you leave the military, you think you're at the top of the game and you think you're joining society at the bottom. You're not. You're not. So do not underestimate yourself. Do not ask, because you earned it and you deserve it.
We've done about a dozen podcasts so far. I think that is about the best ending that we have had. So, Graeme, I really appreciate you coming in. I appreciate you being so open and honest. That's exactly what we're trying to achieve with these, to let veterans know that they're not alone, and to hear the stories of veterans. And it's not all about the being a hero in war. It's the reality sometimes of life after service, which is what we're trying to really dig into. And really appreciate your honesty, and wish you every success in the future. And we may bump into each other on the Mourne someday.
I hope so. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
No, every success in the future.
Thanks.